The Sacramento Kings are beating teams that they're supposed to beat. And if you know anything about the Kings' history, that's actually a pretty big deal. But with the amount of juggernaut teams coming through Sacramento in the month of March, how confident are we that they can carry over the success under Doug Christie in those games against those teams? Jason Ross from SacTown Sports 1140 joins me to talk through that and more right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News, and woke up today. Last night was still fun. Hey, good win for the Kings. I know it was against the Charlotte Hornets. We don't have to preface every single Kings win with a but after it, even for someone like myself who's been pretty pessimistic about the state of this Kings team and where this season is going. But even I can enjoy the night that the Kings had last night. It's always easier to wake up after a victory. And I was very extra excited this morning because I knew I was going to be speaking with Jason Ross from SacTown Sports 1140. Jay Ross, of course, you can hear him with Carmichael Dave in the mornings, Monday through Friday. You hear him on Sacramento Kings radio broadcast. He's been a partner with G-Man, Gary Gerald on the radio broadcast side forever. Jay Ross is truly a legend and an icon here in the Sacramento Kings community, and he's also the former host, the OG host of the Locked On Kings podcast. So being able to have him on and have him come back to the pod is always a lot of fun. So Jay Ross and I are going to discuss and talk our way through, of course, last night's win and what we noticed from the way the Kings played last night. We'll talk through some of Doug Christie's rotational questions, rotational problems, the possibility of changes to the starting lineup or just changing and adjusting the rotation. And then, of course, we'll talk through the Kings beating the teams they're supposed to beat, right? They've been doing a really, really good job of that. Doug Christie has done a really good job of making sure they take care of the games against teams that they should be beating. But how confident are we that those successes will translate in this upcoming month of March against some of these brutal stretches and with these brutal teams coming into town? Jay Ross and I discussed through that and a lot more. So please enjoy my conversation with the one and the only Jason Ross. It's always a pleasure to be joined by Jason Ross, of course, good friend here of the Locked On Kings podcast, because he's the OG, the original host of the Locked On Kings podcast. Many of you may not know that, and a lot of you, of course, do. Those of you who have been with me since Jay Ross has passed the torch over on this podcast, appreciate you so much. Jason, it's always fun to have you back on. Right now, at least for me, hasn't been the most fun of times for the Sacramento Kings, but really much looking forward to you sharing your perspective on this team. Last night was fun, though, especially with Zach LaVine's 42 points and his 18-point explosion there in that fourth quarter. Before we dive into kind of the broad picture, the narrow picture of just what we saw last night inside the Golden One Center, a needed win for this Sacramento Kings team in this playoff race, to say the very least. How much fun was last night for you? And then G-Man on the call of Zach LaVine just going scorched earth.
Yeah, I think, well, it was needed for everybody. I mean, the reality for me, Matt, had they won by 2, it would have been disappointing, but acceptable. I think they just needed a win. But I think they really did a lot of good things in the game, but it's a tough one to measure because, I mean, Charlotte's not very good and they had guys out and didn't play very well. So, but the Kings don't need to worry about that part. And I think, honestly, I had said this on our show and in other areas to people that were willing to listen to me. Matt, I was really worried about Zach LaVine. That's the key piece you get in a trade, and he has not played anywhere near it at the all-star level. So to see him do that certainly was encouraging. That, to me, was by far the best thing about the win.
I don't think it's a coincidence that Zach had his best offensive performance for the Kings. Now, look, he was hitting a bunch of crazy shots there, especially towards the end. I don't know if he would have topped the, 32-point performance that he had in New Orleans. But I also felt that the Kings last night, and I asked Doug Christie about it and Zach about it after the game, I felt that the Kings got back to a major strength of theirs, which is playing through Domantas Sabonis last night. Like, it just felt like they were relying less on, hey, Zach, just attack and try and make things happen. And DeRozan, just do your thing. And more of, hey, let's play around Sabonis and play through this all NBA talent that we have on our roster that was the foundation of the best offense in NBA history 2 years ago, right? And Zach seemed to really benefit, I felt, until the fourth quarter when he just did his own thing. Yeah. He seemed to really benefit from playing through and playing off of Sabonis, who only had to play 27 minutes last night, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and I think there might be something to that because in Chicago, Zach played for Billy Donovan, who was, he ran plays every time. And I thought, oh man, maybe Zach will be even better here, kind of this read and react, kind of more of a free flowing, and he hasn't been. So I think maybe it was by design, a little more purposeful. Like let's structure a few things with still it kind of being hidden in read and react, but a lot of it like directed through Sabonis, to your point. And he got off to a good start and then just never cooled off. And then at the end, yeah, those were just heat checks that like, look, I've got something going. Let's see if I can keep it going. And he did. So good to see him get that. I mean, the 3-point shooting was what we all said they're going to get from him. It hasn't been that much on display. I think he's a terrific athlete. I just don't even feel like we've seen that much, to be honest, from him. A couple plays, but so the more they can unleash him, obviously that'll be a better version of the Kings, because while he's been here, he's just been okay at best.
The only real negative that I had from last night was that third quarter. I mean, the way the third quarter played, Doug Christie called it unacceptable. He actually started post-game bringing that up before he even started talking about the positives, which speaks to kind of who Doug Christie is as a coach. Ultimately, the best part was like Charlotte cut the game down to single digits, and then the Kings got it right back to 16 there towards the end. So it didn't really kill you, but you turned the ball over 8 times in the quarter after just 8 times in the entire first half. Those are the kind of quarters that I really hyper focus on, not to be too negative or too pessimistic, but I hyper focus on because those are the type of quarters that when you play the Cavs or the Thunder or the Celtics or any of these teams that are coming through Golden One Center in the month of March, those quarters are backbreaker. Those quarters either erase all the good that you did to build any kind of lead or put you in such a big hole that you're probably not going to be able to climb out of. And that's been a pretty consistent theme, the not taking care of the basketball with this team since all the trades and bringing a bunch of new guys together. Some of that's to be expected with so many new faces, but it seems a little more than that with how much this team is turning the basketball over. What have you noticed just with the sloppiness of this Kings team really over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, it's been since the trade. You're right. Literally, I think the numbers we had yesterday in our pregame on the radio, they had gone from a top 5 as far as fewest turnovers in the league prior to the trade. Since the trade, they were 29th, so second to last. So, I mean, and it's just killing them. And I think you're right, Matt. That not only was a concern in the game, they played the right team last night, because how do you blow a 20-point lead? That game was that's the way it would have done, because you turned it over 8 times. Charlotte was just actually okay in the quarter. They gained ground, got it to, think about it. They got it to 9 with 90 seconds left in the third. And at one point in the fourth, the Kings were up by 45.
That's pretty
so, crazy. That's who they played, but that's got to stop. And some of it, I think teams have defended Malik a little bit differently. I think hopefully Fultz can help now that he's playing a little bit. Even though he's guilty of turning it over a little bit, Sabonis and Valanciunas are still getting 2 to 3 moving screens a game. So those are turnovers, but it's just been the really bad ones, the ones that just don't make a lot of sense. You're always going to have some, but they're getting killed there, and that's got to get better no matter who they're playing.
Yeah, I was optimistic about Malik as the primary ball handler with the departure of De'Aaron Fox, because I thought he carved out a really good role for himself, whether he was playing with Fox or playing with Foxes on the bench, with his facilitating and his playmaking, and especially, and I asked Doug Christie about this before last night's game, the 2-man game that he had established with Sabonis. And then we just hadn't seen that as much. And I was trying to unpack and figure out, like, are the Kings intentionally going away from this? Or like Doug Christie was saying, are they being blitzed and that those sets are being blown up because teams are daring the other new guys to figure out a way to beat them, right? Like, I don't want to blame Malik Monk, because it's not fair to blame Malik, because everybody is turning the basketball over right now. But it just really feels like this team is still, I wouldn't say rudderless, but they're trying to build that rudder back up, and they are doing it without really any kind of true point guard other than Markelle Fultz.
Yeah, they went from kind of a surplus there to, because it felt like Malik was playing that role at a really high level. Even with Fox on the floor, they would play De'Aaron off the ball, and it was working well. But I think what maybe the front office didn't know, and maybe Malik himself too, was that it is different when he's permanently gone. Like when he missed a game or two, Malik did play well. But now people are scheming and game planning and, trying to capitalize on kind of the free spirit that Malik can be, which gives you some good, but also can give you some bad and a little bit of, wild nature out there at times. So I think it's been tough for him, certainly as more of a featured guy to be, schemed for the other team. And again, I just think it's kind of carried over to a lot of players. Like even when Malik doesn't handle the ball, then maybe it's Levine, who's not a true point, or DeRozan, Sabonis, all of them. So it's unfortunately it's contagious, and that has to get shored up no matter if the Kings finish 10th, 9th, 11th, 6th, who knows, but they got to get better there.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swish, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. Any player at all, no matter who they play for, scores 50 or more points in a game this season, Dash Pass members get 50% off of an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. Whether you're looking for a game day feast to chow down on while you're getting ready for all of the action, if you have some late night cravings after a game, lunch on the go before a game, or when you're just trying to get through that work day, or maybe fueling the energy and the fun at the watch party that you may be holding, DoorDash is perfect for you to get all of the food, all of the items that you need from your retailers around you. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. Again, when any player scores 50 or more points in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off of an order the next day, up to $10 off. All you do is use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. You must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. So ultimately, the Kings have a winning record. Doug Christie has a well over 500 record as the interim head coach of the Sacramento Kings. So I'm saying that to preface what I'm about to say, not to make sure I acknowledge the positives of what Doug Christie is doing, because I think Doug is doing an admirable job given the circumstances of how he took over this team. But you look at the wins that the Kings have gotten, especially recently, and there's a consistent theme. Beating Charlotte, beating New Orleans twice, beating Dallas, who was very shorthanded after the Anthony Davis injury, beating the Washington Wizards, beating the Brooklyn Nets, beating the Chicago Bulls. The Kings are beating teams that they are supposed to, which is a good thing, given the fact that we've seen this team struggle to do that in years past. So good that they're handling the business in those games, but how concerned are you about this team's ability to keep up the winning that they need to keep up in this playoff race when they get into this brutal month of March, J. Ross? They have the Utah Jazz tomorrow. That's another game that they should absolutely get. They've beaten the Jazz already 3 times this season. After that, the rest of the road trip, Houston, Dallas, Denver. There's some gettable games in that bunch, but you've got the Clippers, the Knicks, Memphis, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Boston, Oklahoma City, all in a tight stretch. Most of those games inside of the Golden One Center coming up. And that I'm looking at that as like if there's going to be a time for the Kings to kind of avalanche out of the play-in even, and there's a time where Phoenix is looking at their schedule and going, okay, this is where we can make up some ground, that's the spot. So how optimistic or positive should we feel about the wins under Doug Christie, given the quality of opponent that's coming up?
I would be worried about the schedule. I would be. I think here's 2 things of good news I would say for Kings fans. One, Phoenix actually by numbers has a more difficult schedule, and they are playing worse. I think San Antonio is almost out, not completely, not mathematically, but I think with Victor and just the way they're playing, I mean, they're 7 below 500, so they'd have to take great work. But I feel pretty strongly that the Kings are going to be a top 10 team. But what's that mean, Matt? I mean, they might be 10. They might be 9. I feel like the additions are good. I like the bench better. I think there's things here. I just don't know what their ceiling is. I don't feel like their ceiling's very high. I mean, you could maybe talk me into getting through the play-in if things went right and then getting to a playoff series. But I mean, and even if you go further back, Matt, than just like some of their better wins too, like they got some breaks. There were some people that have been out in some of these games. Now that's part of the league. That there's no apologies for that. So I just would like to see them do this at a higher level for longer stretches against more teams. Like there's a Boston win in there. There's a Warrior win in there where they throttle them. And they have good wins, but just not enough consistently. And it feels like they're about this kind of team that's around 500. So in that stretch, I think it's after the Utah game. I want to say it's like 11 of 14 against teams above 500. They'll grab a game or two in there. We're like, hey, nice win. But I mean, if there's 7 or 8 losses in there, that's not going to be that stunning to me.
And that's where, like, I did a podcast about this on Saturday, Jay Ross, where I was kind of looking at just the state of this organization, the position that they've put them in, not just for the remainder of this season, but this upcoming summer. There are going to be a lot of tough decisions that need to be made about this organization, regardless of what happens here. And I understand Kings fans' frustration with kind of the overly pessimistic viewpoint that I've had really since Mike Brown was fired. I've just not felt good about anything since that point. Felt like it's been kind of a downward spiral. But like you remember as well as I do, during that long playoff drought, the Kings were consistently in what's considered to be like the worst position they could be in, which was in the middle, right? They were this was before the play-in, so they would finish 9th or 10th and just be out of the playoffs altogether. The draft pick wouldn't be good enough, and so they wouldn't be bad enough to get a great draft pick to make a lot of changes. And then when they did, they typically wasted that pick.
Right.
And then they wouldn't be good enough to ultimately compete. And where the Kings are standing right now, they have the best odds at like the 13th or 14th pick. Their pick next year is top 12 protected. I'm not calling for the tank or anything like that. I don't want to see that. Nobody in Sacramento wants to see that. Like, I think the entire organization is unified on, we're going for the playoffs. We're not tanking or anything like that. If we lose the pick, so be it. But you're in a position where if you go for it and sneak into the play-in 9 or 10 again and then lose, like you're staring at what? What are you looking at? It's hard for me to separate the future outlook with just this season, and all of those play a factor when you start looking at this organization and this team going forward.
Yeah. And I don't know how you feel about this, but my feeling after they traded Fox was, like, let's assume they didn't trade Fox and the season's going the exact same way that it was. So they're flirting with 8, 9, 10, 11. Who knows where they're going to finish. I still feel like you could probably wrap yourself around an idea of like, well, they still have Fox, who still is a really good player. They still have Sabonis. Maybe you get Keegan and then a tweak here or there with kind of this core felt like there was still something that maybe they hadn't quite reached their potential.
Yeah.
The moves that they made it feel like, Matt, that these were kind of more finishing pieces, but this team isn't finished. Like it's not a polished, like, boom, insert Levine, insert Valanciunas, insert LaRavia. That's the team that gets to round 2 or even the conference finals. It doesn't feel like that to me. And then since you're not that, or at least it doesn't appear to be, where do you go next? Because you're likely, again, an 8, 9, 10, 11 team that may not get out of the first round. That's a little bit older. Like, what's their great young player you're looking at? I mean, they're not dinosaurs, but they're just kind of in that middle ground again. And it feels like, again, maybe you make a tweak or two in the offseason that does work, but it feels like it's got to be a pretty big one. And I don't know what your greatest young player is. And that's a little concerning for me.
And then I know it's not our money necessarily. Vivek's fronting the bill. We're not. But unfortunately, financially, you're tied up into some pretty significant contracts that are not going to be easy to move. I mean, look how difficult it was for the Bulls just to move Zach LaVine. And the Kings were, I guess, willing to play ball. So the future is definitely concerning. But the good news about the trade deadline being over is, like, it's done with. This is the roster that you have. This is what you got outside of any kind of free agency moves, which they did with Markelle Fultz. Like, this is what you got. So looking at this team and projecting to this upcoming stretch going, like, one of the things I think this Kings team needs to also find consistently again is an identity. I would think you would say, well, they should play fast paced and get up and down the floor. Okay, that's good, but they have to get defensive stops in order to get up and down the floor. And I don't trust this team to get any kind of defensive stops. So a realistic identity that you think can, I won't say win the Kings games, I'll say maximize this roster. What do you think? What is the maximum optimal way to play, in your opinion, of this collection of talent that Sacramento has?
I know Doug, I think, even said last night that he wants to hit that 53-point attempt number. I don't know if I think that's too high. I don't think his team is that good of a shooting team. I think they should be better than they are at 3-pointers, but I don't know if that's the exact thing they want to do to maximize the wins that you're talking about. To me, here's the trick. I think, Matt, their best offensive group is the starting five. Their best defensive players are coming off the bench. I still think there can be a tweak there to mix that up a little bit. And a lot of people point to Keon. Sure. I'm not the coach. You're not the coach. I would have no issue of putting Keon in the starting lineup. It would be difficult to talk to Levine, DeRozan, Malik, and say one of you or two of you, if we move two defensive guys into this, I'm like, if you started Fultz and Ellis and moved Malik and let's just, for argument, Levine, I don't think they'll do, but you might be better. You might start better, and you're definitely playing the other guys. This isn't a, hey, you've gone to the bench, we're done with you. No. All these guys should be playing. I think they've got 8 or 9 guys that can be playing consistently, but I just feel like it's a little bit mismatched right now. And so there's a good offensive unit, there's a better defensive unit. Neither of them are like amazing, but I think if you mixed it up a little bit, that might be the better version of this team.
Unfortunately, Keon Ellis hurt his ankle last night, so hopefully he's okay so the Kings can get him back, because a lot of Kings fans were what we call like kind of practice jersey watching, right? And they saw he was wearing one of the black jerseys in practice, which typically signifies he's a starter or working with the starters, which maybe at the time he was. Maybe at that point they were running him with that starting unit and just seeing what it looked like. Ultimately, Doug decided to stick with the same starting lineup. I'm not super surprised by that. But he had Keon check in 4 minutes into the game.
Yeah.
And he checked in for Malik. And I thought that was interesting because Malik, you see a substitution that quick, and typically you think, okay, that a player's doing something wrong. Malik got those first 4 minutes. Malik was actually pretty good. And so it made me think like this was a set rotational plan. And I think it wasn't just about getting Keon Ellis out there to add some defensive help to Keegan Murray. It was about staggering the rotations a little bit more so that Zach LaVine wasn't the only one trying to run that second unit. Because I don't know about you, J. Ross. I feel like that's been a disaster. Yeah. I like Zach. I do understand he has some playmaking capability, but if he's the engine of your second unit, I think you're in trouble. So we saw more of Malik and Zach together with that second unit, which ended up working out. But clearly, Doug is as close to making a starting lineup change as he can be without doing it. If he's bringing Keon Ellis or in the second half, Markelle Fultz into the game 4 minutes after the start of the game or start of the quarter.
Yeah, this is kind of what they did a little bit. Maybe it was a minute or two longer with Fox before, so he'd be the first sub, and whether it was Malik before he was starting and others coming in or Keon. But yeah, second half, to your point, Matt, it was Fultz, so same idea. He kind of came in pretty quickly. We had seen it early on. I think DeRozan has had it happen to him, and even Levine. Then Levine plays the whole first quarter. So there's still some tweaking, some adjusting here to kind of figure out what's the best. But then as that game went along, I thought LaRavia did some good things. And then honestly, pardon me, but I've forgotten about Trey Lyles, that he came in the second half and went, wait, he hasn't even played yet. And then he was really good. So, I wouldn't say like they've got this surplus of talent, but it's deeper than they were certainly in the beginning of the season. And they're just getting better results. Like Herter's a better player than he played, but he wasn't playing very well when he was here. They were playing Carter more. Then he got into a stretch where he wasn't playing very well. So I think with Valanciunas, LaRavia, Keon off the bench, and Trey Lyles, that should be the 9 in some order and figure it out in minute dispersal and big and small and who's hot, that kind of thing. I think that's the group, but what's the ceiling? I don't know that it's very high, but it should be better. It should be a play-in team. That, to me, I think they should do that.
There's a lot of conversations, of course, about the starting lineup, but the closing lineup is also what intrigues me because, and maybe this is more situational depending upon the way the game is going, but like this team is so offensively gifted, and that closing lineup typically is primarily offensively focused, to where like, do you just accept at that point that you're going full Mike D'Antoni and it's just, okay, in the final 5 minutes, we're just going to outscore you as best as we possibly can? Or how much do the Kings need to look at making a tweak to that closing lineup too in a close game? We didn't see this last night, but in a close game down the stretch where you also need to get stops to be able to create offense. I mean, we saw what CJ McCollum did to the Kings in New Orleans right before the All-Star break was done, and Keon Ellis was or so should I say All-Star break started. And Keon Ellis was sitting on the bench pretty much that entire time while CJ was cooking. So where do you fall on when it comes to closing? Like DeRozan's a closer. Zach LaVine's an incredible offensive player. Sabonis has to be out there. Keegan, Malik, like what do you change with that closing lineup in order to try and get more defense out there?
Yeah, that's where Keon's the problem. A good problem. Like, you want him on the floor. He's also still a good offensive player. I don't want people to just think Keon's defensive oriented. I think he can score too. That's a little bit of the roster construction that gets back to the issue. If you put Keon in, then who do you take out? Malik's your best option at point guard. That's a tough one to take out. DeRozan is your best clutch scorer, and LaVine's your highest paid player that's been an all-star. So that's where, hey, Doug, you want to be a head coach? I mean, you're dealing with egos. It's tough to take guys out. Now, there's some natural things that happen with the offense, defense, timeouts, free throws that you can slide in there, but it's when it's not natural, or maybe you're out of timeouts, or you've got to play a minute straight of, hey, are we going to try to get two-way guys out on the floor? So he's got to do that by feel, I think. I don't know that it always has to be the same group, but until that New Orleans game, they were on this incredible stretch, Matt, where I think they've won 7 consecutive games decided by 5 points or less. The irony of that, I think New Orleans ended up winning by 6, so they kind of still are in that window, but they should have won that game.
Still alive.
That was the one, though, where, okay, history says DeMar DeRozan's your best clutch player. He had just won the game in Dallas. They went to him 4 straight times. He missed them all. Like, he could have put the game away, and he didn't. So that's one where you go, okay, after 2, do I take him out? But also probably the third one he's going to make. He didn't. And that's a really tough one to do for coaches, for Doug, and for anybody.
Well, you and I are pretty familiar with Doug. Well, you're very familiar with Doug. I got the opportunity to work with him for a short period of time while he was at SacTown Sports. You got the opportunity to work with him many, many times on the radio and over his course. So you're very familiar with Doug. I don't think it surprises anybody who knows Doug that he is having success, right? It was just the opportunity, but the things that he's dealing with and the complications and stuff that he's facing. I know, like when I was talking about this tanking concept over the weekend, Jay Ross, I was thinking, like, I remember Doug Christie talking about tanking when the Kings were bad and he was on the radio and he was disgusted. So how the hell do you think he feels about the concept when he's the head coach of the team? But the one thing that I have lingering in my head, Jay Ross, is, so you're an interim coach. You want to try and get that interim tag taken off, and some would think he's already done enough to have that interim tag taken off and be named the head coach going forward. I'm of the belief, I don't know if you share this belief or not, I'm of a belief that a change needs to happen in the front office this summer. And typically, if you change your front office, you bring a front office in, you allow them to hire their own head coach. But we won't have to go down that whole rabbit hole necessarily. I'll just ask you this. Have you seen enough, you feel, from Doug Christie over these 25 or so games, 26 games or whatever, to believe that, like, you would be confident with the organization giving the keys over to him full time as the head coach going forward? Or do you still feel like we need to get the context of the remainder of the season and a play-in game or 2 or playoffs or whatever in order to make that determination?
I think everything, like, to me, I think it's always worth waiting. Like, I don't think Doug and his agent or whatever would be in a spot like, hey, give me this job right now, give me security, let me know. So, one, you've got that. I think also you have to learn from your past experience. I think the Kings, we have the Luke Walton example where it seemed like they're hemming and hawing. They decide to extend him, and then they fire him a few games into the season. Mike Brown, for whatever reason, hemming and hawing, extend him. He doesn't get through this season. So I would hope they would learn from some of that. And, you know, this is where it's hard for me because not only, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Doug Christie. I want him to have the job, but I want him to have it under the right parameters. I want it to be right for him. I think if he gets through this season and they want to go with him, I think he has shown the ability. Look, I think when he got the job, I think they were 5 below 500, lost the first game to get to a season low 6. Here they are 1 game above 500. It's not earth shattering, but I mean, you did take away arguably your best player.
Yeah.
You've gone through some tough times and he's navigated that really well. I love his messaging. I personally would love to play for someone like Doug, me.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the players have responded to him, but you also have to do it consistently for a long period of time, and not, when it is his full-time job, and if it becomes his full-time job, and when you maybe don't have the greatest draft, or you have great draft. I mean, you've got to go through all of it, and Doug's wants to. The want is there, and then I think if he does get it, I wouldn't be surprised if the bench looks a little different. It would have to be, it should be his guys, and so there's a lot of things that are potentially could change for this team, for the better, for the worse, and I sure hope Doug's a part of it, because I think he's a positive asset to the organization and to what they're doing. That's for sure.
Well, J-Ross, no matter what happens over the home stretch of this season, you and Carmichael Dave will have it covered over there in the mornings on SacTown Sports 1140. Thank you for making the time after your show to come here on Locked On Kings today, my friend. And, of course, you can hear J-Ross with the G-Man and the High Flyer, Henry Turner, Deuce Mason, the entire crew on Kings radio broadcasts every single night. J-Ross, appreciate you. Hopefully things work out and this team can catch fire and surprise all of us, because you look at this roster, there's the potential for a lot of fun on this roster. We got a little lob oop between DeRozan and Levine last night, which was pretty fun. Of course, Levine's explosion. So there's some potential for a lot of fun, but the most fun is winning. And that's ultimately what this Kings team's got to do. So I appreciate you, J-Ross.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me.